Welcome, everyone, to the Information's TITV. My name is Akash Pasricha. It is Tuesday, October 14th. We have got another full tour of the tech sector today for you folks. We are talking about health tech with the CEO of Oura. We are also talking fintech with the CEO of Brex. We're then going to talk about the race to rent out NVIDIA chips. And finally, we have a great discussion planned for you about how AI can actually have an impact on the physical world. But before we get going, I want to highlight for you a big story that we published last night. The Information is first to report that OpenAI is working with ARM, the chip company owned in large part by SoftBank, to develop CPUs. A reminder that CPUs are different from GPUs, the AI chips that have taken the world by storm. But the key thing here is that all AI chips need CPUs to work, and so that is why this story is important. The news came on the heels of OpenAI's announcement that it is working with Broadcom to jointly develop their own chip, and so this is a big story. It is moving ARM shares it moved ARM shares after hours last night, I should say. They continue to move this morning. We will link it in the show notes. And with that, let's get to our first guest. Oura has made big news today, announcing it has raised $900 million at an $11 billion valuation. The investment was led by Fidelity Management and Research Company with participation from Iconic. The company is on track to pass $1 billion in annual sales this year. And I want to bring on Tom Hale, the CEO of the company, to share more about where he plans to take Oura in this next phase of growth. Tom, welcome to TITV. It's great to see you again.
Great to see you, Akash. Thanks for having me.
So a big day for Oura. The company, the place I want to start with the company is last time you were on the show a couple months ago with editor-in-chief Jessica Leston, you mentioned to her that the company's profitable. And yet you've still raised all this money. And my question is, why do you need to raise the money if you're profitable?
Well, good news. Everyone knows that AI is incredibly expensive, and I think AI and the future of healthcare are intertwined. So I think we want to make sure that we have that ability to invest in AI, particularly as we think about acquiring talent and making investments and maybe ultimately developing our own models. So this is certainly the first thing that we want to invest in. The second thing, of course, is that we're still at the very beginning of this business. Oura has been on a tear. We've been doubling the business, year over year. We're about to reach $1 billion in sales, and the reality is we're just getting started because we're barely just in the US today. So we've got a lot of headroom and expansion around the globe. And I think that's going to take us, a fair amount of investment to make sure that we can cover the planet. Then the last piece, of course, is healthcare. Our vision always has been to be a wearable that is across the entire surface of holistic health. And healthcare is in transformation right now. We don't have enough doctors. We don't have enough preventative medicine. The prediction that we do, some of the practices that are grounded in science are still, they're dated data. We have up-to-date current data on the people who are wearing the Oura Ring. We want to take that data and make it present in health. And I think that's a very different kind of company than what we've been today. And so we need to invest in the talent, in the people, in the process, in the systems, in the science to really make a healthcare journey for Oura take its next stride.
Whose AI models are you using right now? What are you using them for?
So we use almost every model that's available. And I think we have a range of things that we do. It starts, of course, with the predictions that the system makes using algorithms that are basically there to tell you what are the values that we're doing from the signals that we're taking off of your body. And we've been doing that for 10 years. We're probably maybe the best in the world at these kinds of algorithms for signal processing.
And so we're talking a combination of open source models, closed source models. I mean, the big models like OpenAI.
Well, so for those models, those are almost entirely developed by us, although we're using all the tools. The second place is this kind of idea of what you might think of as the doctor in your pocket, right? You've already got a supercomputer, you've got a wearable device. There's some intelligence that's looking over that data, knows lots of things about you that you've shared with it, your context, your health history, your tags, your biometrics, and making sense of that. That is actually really another form of this AI, and that's largely models we develop. Then there's interpretation and presentation of insights. So basically, you might want to interrogate your data and say, what's going on? And an LLM type application will respond to you and say, well, this is what's going on. Or you might ask for advice. And those LLMs are, I think, what you would expect to be the classic LLMs and the open source and closed source models that are available. And so across all three of those surfaces, you've got a substrate of AI. Now, ultimately, where I think this all goes is you think about the quality of the data that something like the Oura Ring has, meaning it's consistent, it's accurate, it's continuous, it's measured overnight. Feeding call it a large physiology model with that data is going to be able to create an AI that is effectively targeted and oriented around you, because
Right.
your health and my health are not the same. And so how do you create an intelligence that supports the vast diversity of both health conditions, people, ethnicities, races around the planet? I think that's the challenge that we want to invest behind.
I do want to ask you though about the profitability of building out these AI tools, because as you mentioned, the company is profitable now, but we've seen with a lot of these application layer companies, certainly those companies who are looking to build their own models or utilizing models that exist. I mean, it's expensive right now. There's no two ways about it. And so are you concerned at all that this is going to lower your profitability margin as you look to build out an AI at all? Or how do you think about that?
Well, I have a really interesting kind of thesis on this, and I think part of it goes to privacy. People want to have, very strict controls over their health data, and I think that's something that we take as a first principle. And making sure that we don't share your data is like something that Oura, believes in from our foundation. Now, the key is that how do you do that in a world where you have AI interpreting or even communicating to you via an LLM about your health? Our vision for this is to put that AI at the edge, meaning that it is on the device that's in front of you. And if to the degree that we can put as much of that processing, as much of that AI on a device that's close to you and under your control and is encrypted and maybe locked by your biometrics, that's the vision that we see. Now, the side note effect of that is that if you do that, you're also taking advantage of the latent processing power of all these devices, which are underutilized in terms of their computing capability and are accelerating in terms of their power. So part of our vision is to have AI at the edge that is private, but also ultimately lower cost. And so that's how we think about that cost problem that you highlight.
And I hear you, and it's a tough challenge. It's something that a lot of these wearables companies are thinking about. The other question I wanted to ask is, and you were asked this morning about your plans, whether or not you IPO or not. I mean, how do you think about building this as a standalone company versus something that, honestly could fit very nicely into a bigger tech company? And as you talk about edge computing, the ability to put LLMs on the devices themselves, this is something that, we've heard companies like Apple is even considering.
I think this is the way it's going to go. I think absolutely, and particularly for these kinds of applications, I think actually it's going to be really mandatory to have that privacy at the edge. So I think that is viable. I think that's the path that we're on, and I think that's
and you think you can do it alone? You can do it alone?
I think. I don't think anybody in tech does anything alone, Akash. Let's just be really clear about that. But if you're asking really about us as a standalone company, we've raised money and we've raised money at a pretty good valuation based on the back of our financials. Our financials support that valuation. This is not an outrageous valuation. This is not some projected value. This is based on the dollars that we delivered last year and the dollars that we're going to deliver next. So that's relatively comfortable. However, there's a call option here, and that call option is on that future of AI and healthcare, which I think is being transformed. It's happening faster than maybe anyone predicted. And I think that it seems inevitable. And so there's a call option on that, which I think is actually, honestly, enough to support a company of our size, increasing to, from a $10 billion valuation to a 20, a 30, a 40, $50 billion valuation, because the future of healthcare and the way health is managed and delivered, where people are the agents of their own health journey, they are in charge of their own health journey. That change is a transformation that I think is a generational transformation. So I don't think of us as like, oh, well, we're a little wearable company. I think of us as like a platform, an operating system for your health. Think about the value that could create in the market.
Two more quick questions for you. I wanted to ask about the devices themselves. You introduced some new designs today. The price point is still around a couple $100, right? I see the new designs there. How much money do you make on selling the device itself?
So what's amazing is that we make both a contribution margin when we sell our product. So on day one, we're profitable on a unit economics basis. That's actually really powerful. And the reason why it's powerful is because Oura also has a membership model, and that membership model is sort of an ongoing revenue stream. So when we sell a ring, we're making back the cost of acquisition and the cost of manufacturing and a little bit of profit, and then that is a ticket to a subscription business.
Right.
So our margin.
How much is that contribution?
What do you mean?
How much is the contribution margin on the devices?
Oh, it's quite high. I mean, the sort of hardware margins, right? Hardware margins, if they're doing great, are 40%. We're north. Okay.
North of 40%. Okay.
And by the way, this is a function of like being a really good scaled hardware company delivering that. But then that is a zero CAC ticket to a subscription business. And that elevates our margins even higher. So when you look at Aura's financials, we don't look like a hardware company. We look much more like a software company with a hardware component.
Right.
I think that's a key, again, going back to the valuation of a standalone company. That's one of the keys that allows Aura to be like, at the top of the pile when it comes to valuation.
Right. And I should remind people, I mean, this is the second year in a row you're raising money. I don't know if you may have raised money 3 years in a row. I don't know, but I know you raised another big round last year as well. The last thing I want to ask you before you go is I know you have a number of partnerships with other companies that have devices that are FDA approved. And we've seen companies like 8 Sleep, for example, coming out and declaring we are going to seek FDA approval for our line of products in the future. Can we expect Aura to seek FDA approval for any of its products in the coming year or two?
Yes, we already have a Class 1 medical device in our fertile window. Basically, that's the feature, the software feature that predicts when a woman is ovulating. So if you're a couple who are trying to conceive, that feature is one that we've worked through the FDA on. And we have others in the pipeline. I think that's part and parcel of kind of our investment towards becoming more and more like a healthcare company. Having FDA approvals is both important for safe and effectiveness, but it's also a mark of seriousness and confidence that the technology is accurate and that it's validated by science and that it can be used by clinicians. It's stunning to me the number of people who use Aura as part of their health regime. 10%, 11% of our customers are clinicians of one form or another. So we're already in the healthcare space being used in a variety of ways, and we expect to actually extend that further with as we work deeper and deeper with the FDA.
Great. Tom, well, thank you so much for coming on the show again. It's always a great conversation. Congrats on the new funding round and excited to see the new designs as well that are being released today. That is Tom Hale, the CEO of Aura, here on TITV. Okay. Earlier this month, the CEO of Brex sent an email out to his employees boldly declaring that the turnaround is over and the company will now return to unconstrained ambition. I want to bring on Pedro Franceschi, the CEO who wrote that memo, to tell us about how he's shifting his thinking to this new phase of growth for Brex. Pedro, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So let's talk about the turnaround being over and this period of unconstrained ambition. I kind of want to segment the discussion to two halves. One is the turnaround, one is the unconstrained ambition. Tell us about what exactly the turnaround is that you're referring to.
Yeah, so maybe let me just start with where we are today. So if you just look at the business over the past 20 months, we rebuilt entirely how we operate as a company. So when we think about the way we build products, the way we build our go-to-market, the way we operate, the leadership team, and just the sort of talent density on leadership levels in the company, they are very different from where they were 20 months ago. And I wrote a few memos about this on having leaders that operate at all levels, changing the way we build a product, and me as a founder and CEO being much more involved in the product roadmap and the quality of what we ship. And as a result, in August, Brex grew just shy of 50%. Year on year, and was operating cash flow positive for the first time since its inception.
Right.
So it's a very different reality from where we were 20 months ago, and we're very proud of that.
And I'm curious that you use the word unconstrained ambition, because one of the things that you talked about is the company has been operating cash flow positive for the first time in its history. And my read on it was, okay, we are returning to focusing on growth now, and growth at all costs sometimes can yield, dicey results, as we've seen with many different companies in Silicon Valley. And so my question for you is, how do you plan to spark this new phase of growth, I guess, while growing profitably? I mean, that is the constraint that comes with this ambition, right?
Absolutely. So when we say unconstrained ambition, really what we mean by that is if we just look at the market that we're in today, and I think folks don't necessarily appreciate that, there's $2 trillion of corporate card spend in the US. And Brex today is like, a little bit over 1% of that. And if we look at all the new players combined, right, we're maybe 2.5% of the market. So this is a market that's very deeply dominated by incumbents. So you have banks that have been around for decades, serving customers in a very poor way, with no software, with no way of actually improving the way they run their business. And when we look at the way customers run their operation with Brex, and you see, companies like ARM, Cursor, Intel, Anthropic, Palantir, right? All sort of materially changing how their business operates because they partner with Brex. That is really what we're talking about. How do we bring this spirit and this product that we have working so well for this tiny sliver of the market, this 1% of the market, into the, this 98% that's
Right.
still dominated by incumbent. That's really what we mean by unconstrained ambition. And we
So how do you do it? How do you do it?
is just continue to execute the same level of rigor, raising the bar every day. And just really, when you look at the market and you just realize that most people actually have no idea what Brex is, or that there's even a better way to think about how you manage your finances as a company. And that's really a very big part of the story. And especially now, if you see what's happening with AI, we think there's this bigger opportunity to not just build the financial services, which is what we did early on, and the software, but
Yeah.
all, effectively all the infrastructure that you build to help these companies replace all the labor that you have traditionally doing work that can now be automated. And we're very excited about the opportunity.
And what do you see as the next phase of fintech, broadly speaking? Because fintech it's had a period where we had the ZERP era, we sort of had the reckoning era, and now people are sort of trying to figure out, okay, what does the next few years look like? In your mind, let's make some predictions here. What are we going to see?
Yeah. So I have a saying that internally, and I guess externally as well, that fintech in the US hasn't really happened yet. So when you look into the percentage of the market that is using a modern solution like Brex, it's so tiny still. So a lot of the work is just getting customers there. It's just literally going after every single business in America that
Hmm.
could be using a modern solution and explaining them, hey, you shouldn't be using American Express. You shouldn't be using your bank card anymore. You shouldn't be using your traditional bill-pay solution. And here are the benefits of bringing this all under Brex and how
Hmm.
it helps your business move faster, spend smarter, right? And all the benefits that we see customers as they deploy a solution like Brex in their team. So I think that's one, which is, fintech hasn't really happened when you just look at sort of a very mainstream use case.
Hmm.
The second one is when you look into what we build, right? And, we made a few decisions that I think were pretty different in other fintechs. Everything that you have on the financial services side was built in-house. So all the card payment rails, capital markets, underwriting, credit, we built the entire sort of bank stack in-house. Then we build this partner ecosystem that surrounds our customers, especially larger ones, with every single solution they need. They have deep integrations with Brex, and we did it
Right.
slowly, right? So when you look into sort of the breadth and the depth that you have to serve these very sophisticated use cases, I
Right.
think that's something that I think will be more of a trend that
I,
we haven't done in fintech as well.
I do want to ask you, Ramp raised a ton of money. You guys must be raising too, right?
So, I mean, there's a very, very good validation in our space that there's huge companies to be built here, and we're very excited about it.
Are you raising? Are you out there
We're not
fundraising?
raising. We're not raising.
Not raising.
Not
Okay.
raising.
Brex is
Not
not raising. So if you're not raising, on the heels of this profit operating flow, can't speak today. Operating cash flow positivity that you guys have achieved. What is the strategy here to compete with companies like Ramp?
So first, when you look at the size and sheer scale of the market, right? Really, the competition is American Express, the big banks. That is who we see, 90% of the deals. Like that is who we're competing with. And when a lot of what we try to do and sort of educate the market is when you go actually look at the deals that we're in and actually the competition, like who we see is big banks that are treating customers the same way. And
Yeah.
that's really who we're trying to win against. That's really the competition for us. And we see a lot of the new players in their space actually almost as a forcing function to help the industry change and realize that there's a better way of doing things.
Right.
So for us, that's really the competition. It's just the amount of incumbent banks that treat customers with a solution that is so subpar from where they were maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And then when
Right.
you add an AI and just the lack of awareness and understanding of how to build a product that actually fundamentally changes how a finance team operates, the bar is exceptionally low. And that's really like who we compete with.
Right. Great. Well, Pedro, I want to thank you for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. I am excited to see what new products you have in store for us, because one of the things you talked about in your memo was that you've got a lot of stuff under the hood, which means I'm excited to see it rolling out. That is Pedro Franceschi, the CEO of Brex. Thank you so much for joining us here on TITV. Well, OpenAI is charging ahead with its plans to make its own chips. Largely, though, it relies on the business of renting AI chips, and that business has given rise to a new segment of companies called NeoClouds. My colleague Stephanie Palazzolo published a story on that topic here. I realize that intro doesn't quite make sense. We're talking about NeoClouds here on the show. My colleague Stephanie published a great story on the topic, and she has some reporting on Together AI, which I want to get to. Stephanie, welcome back to the show. It is great to have you. Let's talk all about the wonderful business of NeoClouds. What is the news with Together AI that you found? Let's start there.
Yeah, definitely. So, Together AI is a company that's actually up until this point kind of been known as either an inference provider or some people call them a GPU reseller. And basically, what that means is Together goes out and rents compute from other cloud providers and then resells that compute to AI developers. They also have another segment of their business where they host open source models like Llama and get them to run super fast and for super cheap, and then basically allow developers to access those open source models through an API. So that's kind of been the business so far, but now it's essentially looking to, instead of renting out compute from other companies and reselling it, it wants to actually buy its own NVIDIA GPUs,
Hmm.
put them in its own data centers, and then operate those data centers. So essentially, it wants to become a cloud provider of its own.
Right.
NeoCloud is kind of just another word for cloud provider that is specifically talking about, companies, I guess smaller cloud providers like CoreWeave,
Right.
uh, Crusoe, Lambda, that, together is now kind of joining that are looking to, compete against the likes of Amazon, Google, and Microsoft.
So let me just clarify a couple points here. So we've got this group of NeoClouds, right? These are companies that they are the newer cloud companies, I guess, and their business traditionally has been renting compute essentially, and then selling them out to other customers. What we're seeing here, correct me, I'm asking here, I'm not, what we're seeing here is Together, one of these NeoCloud companies saying, hey, I'm kind of tired of being a NeoCloud. I just want to be a regular cloud company. And so they're going out, they're buying these chips, sort of similar to the way AWS or Microsoft Azure has, and they're going to sell that compute then to its customers. Do I have that right?
Yeah, so NeoClouds and cloud providers are essentially the same thing. So it's more that Together wants to become a cloud provider now and
Okay.
buy its own chips. But NeoCloud is just like a subsection of the cloud provider group that's specifically referring to these newer kind of upstart clouds like CoreWeave that are trying to compete against the bigger cloud providers. So
So effectively, we can kind of just call them cloud providers, really.
yeah, yeah. Basically, a big part of my job is just giving new names to things that are not old names and making it even easy. So we can basically call them cloud providers. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that we should say you do a lot more than that, Stephanie. Okay, so don't sell yourself short. I do want to talk about. So you talked about the biggest players here in the Neo cloud space. We've got the CoreWeaves. We've got the Together AI. A big part of this though is the margins associated with renting out this compute. That's a big reason that you talked about in the story that Together is looking to buy these GPUs. Is there evidence that this actually will help their margins, because the chips are still quite expensive, really?
Yeah, definitely. So the kind of thinking here is if you're renting out compute from another cloud provider, uh, you are obviously losing some margin to them. So if you were
Right.
to buy those chips by yourself, you're kind of taking out that middleman cloud provider, which should help margins theoretically. And it does seem like it has in the case of Together. I've heard from sources that the margins have been going up even in the
Hmm.
relatively short amount of time so far that it's been buying its own chips, and now set at around 45%.
Right.
That's still a lot lower than, your traditional kind of software 70% plus gross margins.
Right.
But it is better than kind of what Together was experiencing in the past from having to rent out chips from a cloud provider first.
And help me understand, why would a customer seek to get compute essentially or cloud services from Together as opposed to one of the big hyperscaler cloud companies? I mean, what is the value proposition that these neo cloud or smaller cloud providers actually have?
Yeah, so there's a couple reasons why a developer might want to do that. So I think first, with a lot of the bigger cloud providers, sometimes you have to commit to, multi-year contracts, 3 or 5 years. And a lot of the times, if you're just a small startup, you really have no idea what your compute needs are going to look like 3 to 5 years from now, or, sometimes if you're even going to be around as a company. And so, neo clouds let customers commit to kind of smaller, um, or shorter contracts and are better at kind of meeting demand whenever it spikes.
Mhm.
Another thing that Together claims is that they have the kind of technical expertise to connect the GPUs in a way that make them run faster, or that make them cheaper. And so they can also argue that maybe they're a lot cheaper than some of the bigger cloud providers like a Microsoft, Google, or
Hmm.
Amazon.
And the last question for you, is there a risk at all with this strategy that Together is pursuing, other than the fact that they have to literally go out and buy these chips, which are very expensive? I mean, I guess the risk is what? That if the customers don't come, then I'm sitting on these chips and I don't know what to do with them. I'm paying for all this inventory.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a huge risk, and you also have to deal with the risk of GPUs. We're seeing NVIDIA coming out with like a new GPU every year or every other year, and so there's kind of the risk that if you fill your data center with H100s or Blackwell chips, that by the next year there'll be a new chip out and people won't want to use those older chips. But I do think the one pro that some of these NeoClouds do have is that NVIDIA is, kind of giving them special treatment, giving them special allocations of chips because they aren't trying to create their own competing chips in the way that some of the bigger cloud providers like Microsoft, Amazon, and Google are.
Right. Well, Stephanie, it's a fascinating story, and I'm happy that we demystified at least a little bit what the differences and similarities are between NeoClouds. They're basically just the newer cloud providers. I get it now. I'm with you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm sure we'll see you very soon because the news is moving very quickly. That is Stephanie Palazzolo, our AI reporter here at The Information. Okay. One of the most interesting applications of AI is how it can make changes in the physical world beyond just how people use the internet. And to that end, Radical AI is a company that has been raising a ton of funding lately for the way in which it uses AI to innovate materials science, which can impact everything from space exploration to clean energy to robots and possibly even biotech. I want to bring on the CEO of the company, Joseph Krause, to tell us more about his approach to this sector. Joseph, welcome to TITV. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Happy to join.
So, look, it's a bit of a complicated business, okay? Just to put it bluntly. So tell us what you do, and then we'll get to the strategy at large.
Yeah, absolutely. Complicated and incredibly old as well. I think a lot of big material companies today probably going on 50, 75, 100 years in some cases. So not only is it complex, but deeply rooted in kind of old ways of doing business. What we're focused on here at Radical AI is going from a novel materials discovery and scaling that material all the way up into full scale production. And the materials that we focus on today are what we call enabling based technologies. They
Okay.
are materials that unlock future capability that we technologically do not have today.
Materials like what kind of materials are we talking about here?
Yeah, so it can be a range of things. High entropy alloys is a big first area for us. These are different structural metals that have 5 or 6 different elements in them that have really interesting properties
Okay.
and really extreme conditions. So think about space travel. You mentioned that in the introduction. You get really high temperature, really low temperature, different pressures, different type of oxidation or corrosive
Right.
elements. You need to be able to maintain structure in a rocket or different electronic or semiconducting properties
Right.
while also being able to withstand those extreme environments. So materials like that
Okay.
is that we look into as a company.
And so you're using AI to make materials better, faster? What's the AI angle to this?
Yeah, so 2 parts. So the AI engine is really focused on generating new materials, right? And this is really a serial-based process that humans do today, turbocharged with AI. When I was a scientist, I would spend weeks, months, in some cases a year, researching a new field, reading publications, making new hypotheses, and then
Mhm.
out and testing them. All of that first part before we get to testing, AI can do instantaneously today, and it can do it with very high accuracy. So what used to take months to do what we call discovery or exploration, we can now do in mere minutes or hours.
Hmm.
And the second part of what we do here is a fully robotic self-driving lab. And we have a big saying in material science that until you make that thing in the lab, you actually have not discovered a new material. And so this AI side actually sends these materials into a fully robotic self-driving lab so that we can make these materials and then actually test their performance.
So is the labs, is it robotic devices that is making the materials? That's the idea that you're building?
So it's robotics in there. You get a lot of robotic arms and different type of automation tools, and
Okay.
then material tooling infrastructure as well. So these are a lot of tools that exist in the industry to do both characterization, which means, hey, what did I make? And then
Right.
property testing. Hey, what are the performance? What are the properties of the things that I made in that lab as well?
And how do you make money?
We want to sell materials at scale. So if you look at most of the large material companies today, if not all of them, they sell materials at scale and make a margin on that. That's the exact approach that we're taking as well. And
Got
the
it.
reason why is a lot of companies in this space have moved into informatics and selling software or trying to license out materials. You see this big in the battery space. And that is a real poor business model in material science for a lot of reasons. We want to actually manufacture and sell materials.
So your goal here is not to sell the technology to companies to help them make their materials faster or better type of thing. You want to keep the technology in-house and basically scale your manufacturing operations, essentially.
Absolutely. Incredibly important. And that's really because the way materials exist today, if you go a lot of these end companies in EVs or space or nuclear fusion or aerospace
Right.
defense, they are not material science companies, right? They build rockets, they build cars, they build batteries, they build nuclear reactors. Materials are not their core focus. But the only people that really focus on novel discovery exist a lot in academia or national lab research, which is incredibly important to driving your understanding of science, but it's typically missing that commercialization perspective. So in the middle of both of these is a wide open white space to do this fundamental novel discovery, but entirely focused on commercialization and the markets that can be impacted by them. Those
So
aren't going to do it, and so we can kind of fill the gap there.
So what's going to happen to all of these? I'm sure there are a ton of PhD researchers, I guess, who they finish their PhD in something very specific in materials science. They get hired by a materials manufacturing company, and they have the expertise to discover these new compounds. I mean, are you essentially saying that you're going to replace these PhD level researchers? And I mean, if you are, then what becomes of those researchers? I mean, what do they do then?
Yep. Actually, rather supercharge them. A lot of PhDs that go through, and I myself was going through a PhD program at one point, really spend years developing expertise, as you mentioned, in an area, only to get to a research center and pipette and weigh out different samples. You don't need a PhD to pipette and weigh out different samples. It's quite simple. You can do it at the high school level. And so actually, by building self-driving labs and building this platform that I described, you go from having those PhDs spend all of that brain power on weighing samples to actually thinking about implementing novel material systems and where new design systems that they can build to unlock better performance come from. And now
Right.
for the scientist who gets a PhD in a specific area, has robots and autonomy running all their experiments for them and can constantly be looking at the results of those experiments, their application that they're working in, and tying this bridge between novel materials discovery
Right.
and
Right.
commercial performance.
And last question for you: have you manufactured a product yet that you're selling, or how far are we from you getting to having a product to sell?
Yeah, good question. We're not there yet. We're a pretty young company, about 18 months old. So we haven't
Okay.
manufactured full materials yet. We are making materials here at the company in our lab.
Right.
We have a bunch of different alloys that we've made in a couple of different areas. But that manufacturing step comes after what we call validation. A lot of these materials that we make have to be tested in real
Right.
application.
How long do you think it'll take to finally start making revenue?
We have different forms the way we make revenue. 18 months to probably 2 years, give or take, to sell materials at scale. We have to go through that validation and then manufacture process. We think that's about a 24-month process.
Great. Well, I'll tell you what, Joseph, next time we have you back on the show, why don't you do the interview from inside the lab? You can show us around the lab that you can give us a bit of a show and tell, and maybe we'll get, an iPhone camera. You can sort of FaceTime us in and show us all the different devices. It's,
I'd be happy
I'm
to.
sure it sounds very cool, and I'm sure it's even cooler on the inside. Thank you so much for coming on the show. That is Joseph Krause, the CEO of Radical AI. And with that does it for today's show, folks. A reminder, we are on this stream Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. I want to thank Amazon Web Services, who is our presenting sponsor for this production. And I want to thank you for tuning in. We really do appreciate your viewership. I am already excited for our next show tomorrow. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. Bye-bye for now.